normalize not having things figured out and taking action anyways. Something I think that us in this world has gotten way too comfortable with is waiting until we have all the steps mapped out to take action. And as every single one of us knows, there's never going to be a point when we have all of those steps mapped out, especially if you're trying to do something that you really have to create your own path. And if you want to create a life of freedom and autonomy and just really create a life that you absolutely love based on your skill sets and everything that your experience and your knowledge, then it's going to be it's going to be a lot of uncertainty. And when you think of, let's say, leaving your 9 to 5 job and stepping into business, and I'll use my experience as an example. I worked at Dick's Sporting Goods, I worked at Apple, and it was easy to go into work because I knew exactly what I was going to do. I knew exactly what I had to do. I just need to follow what my manager said I needed to do. And as soon as I started my own business and I had all the freedom in the world to really work on whatever I needed to work on, I needed to figure out what that even looked like. And analysis paralysis was something I absolutely struggled with. And it's something that I continue to struggle with to this day. But I've gotten way more clear on how to overcome it when I'm experiencing it. And that's what I want to break down today, because I think so many of us stop ourselves from taking action on something or really changing our lives at the end of the day because we are unsure of the path. We're unsure of the steps that we have to take in order to get to where we want to go. And so what we have to understand first and foremost is that this is not just a surface level problem. This is something that really starts in our body. It starts in our mind, and it's really difficult to overcome when we're not really clear on why we're doing it to begin with. Of course, we need to have more clarity on where to go, what to take action on to actually move forward. But we have to understand that there's a much deeper issue there that we're not addressing. And we see that analysis paralysis is the hurdle, but what it really is it's our perception of what we think the future is going to be. So, like, what is analysis paralysis? Analysis paralysis really happens when you overanalyze a situation. And this inevitably slows down your progress. And of course, it holds you back because you're trying to make a decision and you're not sure of what that decision is. So you end up not making any decision. And what the reason for procrastination or analysis paralysis really stems from is that we try to delay negative outcomes, or at least what we perceive to be a negative outcome. And so if you perceive that, let's say you take action on something, let's say you leave your job and you start a business. If you perceive that you're going to fail in the business or you're not going to know every step of the way, you're not even going to start to begin with, because our nervous system does not know the difference between what is real and what is imagined. And our mind and our gut are so interconnected to such an extreme extent that you can perceive an idea of what the future is going to look like. And that idea in itself will hold you back from taking action because you're so dead set on this idea that it's not going to work. That fear of failure stops so many of us. And if we're not sure on the path, if it's uncertain, of course, every path is going to be uncertain, then we're going to hold ourselves back from taking any kind of action. And it's not too much information that's the problem, but it's our desire for this perfect solution, this perfect outcome that we're looking for, where really none exists. So if you think, let's say there's path A and there's path B, and you are so dead set on that there is a perfect path to go down. Path A is the path, but you're not fully sure. Path B might be the path for you. Well, you're not going to take any action because you're waiting on this divine timing to happen for you to realize that I don't know which path to go down, that I need to figure out a path, but there is no path, right? There's no perfect path. It's just going to happen once you take action. But if you don't take action and you let analysis paralysis hold you back, well, then there's no path. The only path that you're going to go on is the path that you're currently on. And if you're not okay with the current path that you're on, well, something obviously needs to change. And this paradox of choice is something that I really, I think is really important to touch on, because psychologist Barry Schwartz in his book, The Paradox of Choice, of course, speaks about people will sometimes choose nothing at all if they are presented with more options than they can or are willing to process. And so if you think of Netflix, for example, I know I will scroll for an hour just trying to figure out the first show that I want to watch because there is so many options. And the same thing goes in life. There's so many things that you could do. There's so many things that you can take action on. But if you just stay in this constant state of thinking about what you could do instead of just actually taking action on doing one thing, even if it's the wrong thing, you're going to learn so much more from taking action than you will thinking about taking action. Because again, there is no perfect path to go down. You are going to learn along the journey, but most people don't even start the journey because they're afraid that it's the wrong path. And the thought that you're going to waste time by taking action on something that isn't right for you is a belief that you have to throw out the window, because it is so important to recognize that you will learn so much more from doing the wrong thing than doing nothing at all. So the first part of this is that you have to accept that there is no best decision, right? Thomas Edison famously said, I have not failed, but I just found 10,000 ways that won't work. Right. And you have to adopt this mindset in everything in life, because if you never take action, then you never learn. Because while nobody wants to fail, obviously no one wants to face failure, you have to understand that being too afraid of failure is what's going to hold you back from the learning opportunities that will actually allow you to excel in whatever you want to do or move forward in whatever you want to do. And I think of this in relationships. If you thought that every relationship that didn't work out was a waste of time, well, then you're going to just throw away so much of your life. But if you see every failed relationship as an opportunity to see what you do want and what you don't want, it's the same thing that goes in business or anything in life. You have to make a decision and just take the leap knowing that you don't have everything figured out. And so that's the first part, is accept that there is no perfect path. You just have to take action and get really used to failing and failing forward and failing fast instead of sitting in indecision, because that's going to get you absolutely nowhere in life. Second part of this is to break down what you want to do into shorter steps, right? When we look at something like starting a business and we look at it as such a massive thing, we're never going to start because we look at it as a mountain. And if you just look at each day as, I want to get to that tree 10 meters in front of me, that's all that matters, right? Instead of looking at it as, I want to get to the top of the mountain today, and that mountain is going to take years in advance, we have to understand that we are going to get nowhere if we're trying to take on such a massive thing in one day, when we can really just break it down and make it much easier for ourselves. Everything becomes easier to manage once you've broken it down. And so whatever you're thinking about taking action on, whatever you're questioning, if you have the knowledge, if you have the capability, if you have all the steps mapped out, which of course you don't, just break it down. Like, what's the first step that you can take? And then once you've taken that first step, what's the next step that you can take? And just go from there. Because when you're trying to take so much on at once, you will do absolutely nothing. And when you get to the end of your life, there's going to be a lot more things that you wish you did do and failed at than the things that you didn't do because you were too afraid to fail. And you really have to think of it in the sense of, like, how am I going to feel at the end of my life? And I always put that into perspective, because a lot of this analysis paralysis comes down to us being fearful of what other people are going to think of us, or the failure that we're going to have to experience, and recognize that we are not the failure is the most important part, because there's going to be a lot of failures along this journey, especially if you're doing things that you're unsure about. But you are going to learn so much more from that failure once you've recognized that it is a learning opportunity, but not something to shame yourself or guilt yourself or put yourself down upon, because it is the most information data rich experience that we can have, is that failure that allows us to figure out what we do want and what we don't want in life. And the third part of this is to not override your gut reaction. A lot of us go through life listening to our mind, listening to what is logical. And if we always listen to our mind, which our mind is always going to perceive us to be less than we are, because we can only conceive ourselves to be what we conceive ourselves to be, not the actual reality of who we are and what the world is, well, then we're always going to hold ourselves back from doing anything new. Because if you think of leaving your job and you start a business, it's going to be terrifying, and your mind's going to automatically tell you to not do that thing because it's different. And you have no idea how to start. You have no idea what you need to do. You have no idea all of the steps that are mapped out, because there's no steps mapped out. It's just figuring it out along the journey. Instead of just going on what's on the top of your head and what you believe to be your reality or what you believe to be possible, listen to your gut reaction. Like, your intuition is like telling you something. And I believe in this so much, because when I started this podcast, when I started my business, when I really did anything in life, I always trusted my gut. I didn't listen to what my mind would say, because my mind was going to hold me back. The self-doubt, the insecurity, all of the things that hold all of us back in life could have held me back. But what I chose to do was to trust my intuition, to trust what felt right to me, instead of listening to my mind that was going to hold me back from doing anything that I really wanted to take action on. This isn't to say that you should just take a leap at any moment in time, but it's to be more weary of what your inner self, what your truest self is trying to tell you. I feel like your intuition is like your highest self. It's like your highest self trying to point you in a direction towards where you really truly feel aligned with going towards. But the opinions of others, or what you believe is going to happen, or all of these things that stop you from taking action, be in alignment with yourself. And just when your intuition is trying to tell you something, listen to it. We spoke to Light Watkins on this a few weeks ago about this exact topic. It's important to recognize that your intuition can be a still small voice, something that's like whispering in your ear and you can't really understand what it's trying to say. or it can be a loud, annoying voice. And that's exactly what you want it to be, because when your intuition's trying to tell you something, you obviously want to move in that direction because it's probably going to be the direction that you need to go in. But so many of us push our intuition down because we listen to our mind. We listen to that self-doubt. We listen to the overwhelm. We listen to the stress. We listen to, what we perceive ourselves to be and not what we can actually become. And that's really what I wanted to break down to you in this podcast, is that analysis paralysis is really just your mind trying to keep you stuck where you are instead of taking action and being okay with failure. It's your ego trying to keep your ego safe and comfortable in its comfort zone instead of seeking what you truly feel you're aligned to go towards. Or even if you're in a place where you're just unsettled with, like, why would you get to the end of your life with with a life that you're unsettled with, than to go towards something that you couldn't even imagine was possible? And even if you fail at something, again, you're going to learn a lot more from failure than staying in a path that you're not okay with. And so I hope this podcast was helpful. I hope this gave you a little bit more clarity on how you can overcome the analysis paralysis. Just break down those tasks, break down the things that you need to take action on. Instead of just seeing it as such a massive thing, just focus on the first thing that you can do. And it's going to be a scary yes, but do that thing, because when you get to the end of your life, there's going to be a lot more things you wish you did do and failed at than the things that you didn't do because you were too afraid to fail. That failure is not you. It's a learning opportunity. So I hope this podcast was helpful. And if it was, leave a comment and at me at James Bracken IV, share it on your stories. I would love to connect, and I'll see you in the next one.